Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a issue that has just recently surfaced with the Lumi ranking, and that is going to be retroactive majors. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the pros and the cons of retroactive majors, what I personally think about them, and what the best solution would be. And I think it's really important to understand how the lumirank works, so I'm just going to really quickly give you a breakdown. This is Gommel that is taking place this weekend. It's coming in at an S+ tier, and you can see that it's getting the points to be an S+ tier based off the people that are showing up at this event. And there's two ways that players get their points. One of them is based off their previous ranking on the lumirank. So Songs, for example, third best player in the world on the last lumirank, so he's going to be worth 350 points. Then you have players like Shattuck, for example. His best performance is going to be a first place at Cirque du CFL, and he wasn't ranked super high on the Lumi rank, so they're taking this super high performance and they're ranking him based off that instead. So you're going to be ranked off which gives you the most points, whether it's your highest placement or your placement in the previous ranking. And this is important to understand because if a player does extremely well in the middle of the season, like for example, Tama P did versus Delta 8, certain events can get shifted up to majors because that player is now worth more points. So let's go over the pros and the cons of having retroactive majors, and I made this list on stream. A link will be down below to that full VOD if you want to have the full intricacies of the conversation, and if you don't, I'm still going to be going over it right now. And some of these cons are not as big of issues as other ones, and I'm going to be going in depth of every single one. Starting off with the player that wins the event is getting robbed of winning a major at the time. So a good example of this is going to be Gluttony getting a win at Altcore. During his win at Altcore, it was only a regional. Retroactively, though, it becomes a major event because Tom P ends up getting third place there, and it was barely just not a major. So now Gluttony is going to be one of the only people in the entire world to have a major win in 3 regions on Smash Ultimate, but he got it like 3 months later. And I do think that is a little bit unfortunate that you don't get the glory of winning the major in the moment, but also this only applies to like the one guy that won the event, so it isn't a huge deal, but it does suck for that guy, obviously. The next con is going to be inconvenience of planning. So for people that are only planning to go to major events, if you're looking at the events that are ahead of you and you see that one's a regional, that one's a national, I'll probably skip those two, and all of a sudden those events became majors after they already happened, you could feel a little bit robbed here, and I do think that this is a small issue. It's one that Light brought up, and obviously it is a massive commitment to go to these events, especially if you're across the country, or if you're in a different country, you gotta take the whole weekend off. If you work on the weekend, that's an even bigger commitment. Most of the time you have to be there on Friday as well. You gotta get flights, you gotta get the hotel. It's a lot of money and planning that has to go into this, but my counterpoint to that would be you can look at the lumirank and see exactly how big these events are. So if you can only go to like 5 events a year, then you should only really be looking at these super big events. But let's say you want to go to a small one like Game is Game, for example. Oh, I don't know if I want to go to Game is Game because it's not a major. Well, you can look at it. It's pretty much a major event, and you can look at an event like the Luminosity Smash Invitational. I know it was an invitational, but this one is barely a major, so maybe that's not worth your time. So I do think that this is a valid complaint because it sucks that, oh, I want to only go to major events, and these events that I could have gone to but I didn't because they weren't majors become majors. That's unfortunate, but you could also just look at the points and the value that those events hold and understand, is it worth your time? Is it worth your money? The next one is going to be viewership, and this is a pretty big one. Unlike most of the people that probably watch this channel, a majority of the viewers in Smash Ultimate are only tuning in to the big events, the Genesises, the LMBMs, the Kagadibis. If you're a Japanese viewer, they're not going to be watching the locals or the regionals. They're only looking at events that are having that big major status, and this one is definitely a little bit unfortunate. It's going to be hurting the viewership, and it also is going to be hurting sponsorship potential as much. I can't speak as much into that aspect just because I don't know how much the size of the event actually matters for sponsors. I think viewership probably matters a lot more for them, and the only counterpoint I have for viewership is TOs. You can just lie. You can just say your event is a major. European TOs do it all the time. You look at some Australian events, those events by the lumirank are not even close to majors, but all of the best players in Australia are showing up, so technically they are an Australian major. It is going to affect the viewership, but TOs, just lie to people. It's okay. I give you the pass. Next up is going to be competitive integrity and stakes, and this is easily the weakest point of the entire cons list, but it is still good enough to have a mention. And what this basically means is if you take an event like Genesis, for example, everyone and their mother is trying to win Genesis because the stakes are so high. But if you have a pro go into a B tier, B plus tier, they're obviously still going to try to win, but they're not going to be putting as much prep work into the event. They're probably going to be taking it a little bit easy just because it doesn't matter as much. And all of a sudden you go to that event, you don't do super great. It's okay, it's a B tier, and oh, it changed into an A tier afterwards. Wow, that sucks for you. But my counterpoint to that one is you are a competitor, especially for the people who are in the top 30 of this game. You are getting paid to play this game. You should be trying to win every single event that you are going to. Yeah, it's unfortunate that you weren't giving it 1,000%, but I don't really care because you lost, and that's all that matters. And again, I have to bring it up. You can see the exact point value of every single one of these events. I'll talk about it a little bit more later on in the video, but a player being worth 100 points more, making it a B plus tier to an A tier, shouldn't make it so you're trying way harder because these events are effectively holding the same value. The title shouldn't matter. The look at the points. This is telling you how much effort you should be putting in, and if you were taking it easy because you thought it was a B plus tier, you didn't check how high it was, and it becomes a major, I don't really care. Another point is going to be does not reflect player skill at the time, and this is a really big point I'm going to make later, but effectively what this means is if a guy is really good at the end of the season, but he wasn't super good at the start of the season, should getting wins on him at the start of the season be as valuable as getting wins on him at the end of the season? And again, I'll talk about that in just a second, but it's really difficult to gauge player skill based off a point system. And the final point for the cons is going to be player value only goes up. And I'm going to talk about these two final points at the end of the video just because I don't think they're black and white. But basically, this is just, yes, I think it's good that player values go up. But if they only go up, how accurate is it? Because if a player is really good in 2023 or really good at the start of the season, but they fall off super hard in the latter half, should they be worth a bunch of points? Should some of these events be majors? Do they deserve to be major events compared to other ones where you have players that are better in the current season but don't have as much points? It makes it really tricky, and again, I'll talk about this at the end of the video, but now it's time to move on to the pros. So for the pros, you're gonna have just the one, and that is it makes a more accurate ranking, and I only have one pro because I think this is all the pros you need. I want you all to say it with me, lumirank. That's all that matters. It is a ranking. I don't care if you were robbed of a major, inconvenience of planning, it hurts the viewership. None of that should matter to the algorithm of a ranking. The only goal of the lumirank is to make an accurate ranking of the top 50 Smash Ultimate players in the entire world, which is already a hard enough task on itself. But if you have to factor other variables in there, it is literally just impossible. And I decided to get back to these 2 points, so I'm going to do that right now. Does not reflect player skill at the time. This one is really tricky, because if you have a player that is really good at the start of the season, but really bad at the end of the season, or vice versa, maybe they have an amazing middle, but a really bad close and a really bad start, how would you reflect that player point-wise? Because if you're making their points go up in the middle of the season and then down at the end of the season, majors are going to be changing all of the time. And with player value only going up, then you have players who are just good in 2023 with no good results in 2024, boosting these major events to be bigger than they are. I think the way that you should be looking at major events is how hard is this event to win? And if a player that was good in 2023 is worth 300 points but isn't good currently, should they be giving that event 300 points? No, absolutely not. So the solution that I have come up with, and I think this is the perfect solution, is player value should change throughout the season but should not affect previous events. And this includes players going up in value and players also going down in value. And I honestly think that this is the perfect solution. I'm very confident that if lumirank was able to implement this kind of system, that it would fix every single problem that they're having and make the most accurate ranking that you could have. The problem is I don't think that it is feasible to do this, and it's for 2 big reasons. The first one is going to be making it so players decrease in value. I said if you want to make players increase in value, that's fine, but you also got to make players decrease in value, and I just don't know how you would feasibly do that. Take Spargo, for example. One of the best players in the entire world, does really bad at Delta 8 and Cagliari for his standard, of course. how do you rate him as a player now? Do you have him have a massive point tank, or do you still regard him as one of the best players in the entire world? You have someone like Glutony, for example, was top 5 in the world in 2023, but hasn't been as good in 2024. We all know he's an amazing player still. He has a bunch of really solid results, but should he be regarded as a top 5 player? I don't really know. So it's really difficult to dock players points, but it's a lot easier to give players more points because, oh, that guy is getting results of like a top 20 player, even though he was only in the 80s last season. We should make him have more points, so let's give it to him off his best performance, but giving it to a player off their worst performance when they still have good performances doesn't really work. So while I would love it if players were docked for points and were also boosted for points based off performances, because that's how things work, it just doesn't really make sense. And the other problem, and honestly the main problem that my perfect solution has, is how do you accurately gauge a player's skill throughout the season? And the best example is, funnily enough, Tom P. The reason that this video is happening because he himself made 3 retroactive majors, so shouts to Tom P. for that one. But you start off his season with an amazing second place at Delta 7, but then he gets a 49th at Umaboro. We got a dock of points for that. But then he gets a 3rd place at Alt Core, and now he's top 8ing Delta and Kagadibi. How do you value a player that has a really bad performance, but a bunch of really good performances? Obviously, at the start of the season, he wasn't as good as he was today, because I would be very, very shocked if Tom P ended up getting 49th after those Delta performances and those Kagadibi performances. So should he be worth less points at those events? But he also got 2nd at Delta, so he was clearly very good. It just doesn't really work because there's so much variance in Smash Ultimate. MKLeo is another great example of that. He top 8s LBM, bombs out Genesis, wins King Kong. Should he be worth way less points at King Kong then, even though he ended up winning the event because previously he did bad at Genesis? And then afterwards, should he be worth more points even though he wasn't really able to recapture that magic from King Kong? It just doesn't feasibly work. There's too many micro adjustments that you are constantly having to make, and because of that, I think the only way to realistically have a system with a points based for players is just having them have a flat amount of points. And because of that, sometimes you are going to have players making it so there are retroactive majors, because I still do 1000% believe that if a player is doing really well in the season, their point value should obviously go up. Shattuck was in like the 40s last season, and he's in the top 5 pretty much uncontested right now, and you want him to have only 50 points to his name. Tom P, another example, another player in contention for top 10. He was in like the 80s or 70s or something last season, and you want him to be worth not a lot of points. You should be rewarding players. You should be making them worth more points. And if you have to make a couple majors retroactive because of that in order to give them a flat value, I think it's the correct thing to do. And the final thing that I want to say before we close this video out is that these tiers, they mean pretty much nothing. The difference between a P tier and an S plus tier could be literally 2 points, and you'd have no idea. These are only for the viewers. If you are a competitor and you're actually wanting to go to these events, you should only be looking at the value. And I think that's why this retroactive major problem became a bigger deal than it actually is, because people see, whoa, 3 B tiers went to an A tier. That's crazy out of nowhere. But in actuality, those events got like 300, maybe 400, maybe a little bit more, and of course, example, point adjustments, because they should, because the players that were at those events are doing really, really well. Obviously, those players are good. So it seems like a bigger deal than it actually is. And some of those cons definitely do stand, like the inconvenience of planning. Again, if you're a pro player this game, you should be looking at the numbers. But let's say game is game, for example, you maybe would have gone there, but it's not quite worth it. It's not really going to be a major. And then retroactively becomes a major. Oh, that sucks. But would you have gone to it if it was like a small A tier event? Maybe you should be looking at an event like King Kong, where you can see, oh, this event is worth a lot more points. Or Kowloon, oh, this event is worth a lot more points. I don't think that the tier changing should have influenced if you would have gone to that event or not, because they're effectively the same event. They are the exact same event. They are just worth a little bit more in retrospect. And robbed with winning a major at the time, I think this one kind of sucks, but again, it's only for the one guy. And at the end of the day, I don't think this is the perfect solution, but I think it's the most realistic solution. If I was on the lumirank team and you asked me how to handle this problem, this is the exact same way of how I would have handled it. You have to give players fat values. You should be rewarding players who are doing well, and it's pretty much impossible to retroactively take points away from players. So giving points to players, I think that's fine. It is going to make some events retroactive majors, but at the end of the day, it's going to make a more accurate ranking. And while these cons suck, all that matters for the lumirank is an accurate ranking, because it's a ranking. That's its job. Yes, there are side effects of that, but they aren't its primary concern. And with that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the sport. It's been absolutely unreal as of late. I'm very curious what y'all think about this retroactive ranking system. What would you do? Are there any cons that I missed? Maybe some pros that I missed? Just let me know what you thought about the video down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.